Welcome to the Happiness Contribution Show with me, your happy host, Rosaria Cirillo. On the show, we talk about the various roles happiness plays in our individual lives and in business, and about the benefits that being happy brings. And we share knowledge and practices about what contributes to our happiness. Join me and my guests on this happiness journey together, and get involved by visiting our website at happinesscontribution.com. Welcome to the Happiness Contribution Show. I'm your host, Rosaria Cirillo, Italian and living in the Netherlands since 20 years with my Dutch husband and two boys, 10 and 12. Energy, enthusiasm, passion, curiosity, and love of learning are some of my key strengths. I spent over 20 years in customer experience roles. I'm a certified customer experience professional, happiness trainer, and laughter yoga teacher. And I'm a speaker, trainer, and corporate advisor on all things customer experience and happiness, and the author of Yellow Factor. And I evangelize the role of the science of happiness and well-being in business and in life. This is why in today's episode, after 3 months of unplanned hiatus, I'm giving you a special edition, a very personal and vulnerable one in an unusual format, because this is going to be a solo during which I'm going to share with you the life that happened to me in the past 3 months, which really turned out to be the hardest of my life to date. And I actually recorded this episode already on Friday, but somehow it didn't save. So this is take 2, and hopefully I'll manage to be also a bit shorter because the first recording ended up to be a very long one. Basically what happened was that as of the 9th of November, within a few days, my world literally went upside down and got twisted as my husband got a sudden life-threatening disease. And then after 85 days away from home, of which 49 days in the hospital, of which 38 in the intensive care unit, and then another 36 days at Eliomare Rehabilitation Center, he returned home finally on the 31st of January, so now nearly 2 weeks ago. And finally, I get again to share with you all of that happened. So what do I want to share with you in this first episode is the following. First, a really heavy dose of reality, and with all the challenges, the bumps, the breakdowns that I had as life happened in the past 3 months. Second, the key interactions that I had in this period with companies, with brands, with doctors, nurses, and the small local businesses, as well as with friends and family, and how they impacted me, as I see that the core of what we do is the interaction that we have with each other, and my ultimate mission is to bring more happiness into the world, one interaction at a time. And finally, I want to share with you what contributed or did not to my happiness and to my resilience during this period, and also what were my overall learning. So that's why it's gonna be a long one. So are you ready? Brace yourself, grab a cup of tea. I'm having mine with my Humankind Be Both cup. And I'm gonna start from the beginning with a very long chronicle of the journey, a chronicle that I also rebuilt with all the messages that I've been sharing with my friends, with my husband manager and the family, so that I could really give you a bit of highlights of everything that that happened, and sharing here the common learnings, the shared experience also of the illness itself, because at the end we still don't fully know whether botulism of Guillain-Barré syndrome, but they are both a very rare illness, not always easily recognized, and especially the Guillain-Barré syndrome is now one that seems to happen more often as a potential consequence of vaccine or of COVID. So I have this platform with my podcast. I thought, okay, it's let's use it to share it. If you're not into all of the details of the chronicles and the diagnosis, then you can just skip for the next 20 to 30 minutes and go directly to the learnings. So it all started already on Monday the 7th of November, where my husband woke up with having blurred vision. He went to the doctor. He got recommended to go to the optician, to the eyes doctor, but they could not find anything. On the following day, Tuesday, he woke up with double vision. So again, called up the GP and the eyes doctor, and he got referred then to the, since they could not find anything, he got referred to the neurologist. So Wednesday morning, he woke up still with blurred vision, double vision. He also was starting to have difficulty saying certain words and eating, and his eyelid had started to drop. And he got the appointment with the neurologist for the following Monday. So at that point, I was like, you know, I'm more the type of, you cannot really wait for this and so on. So, but that day I was actually busy with work. So I left it on him to keep having all sorts of calls to try and get an earlier appointment. In the evening at 5 o'clock, I was actually facilitating the Wednesday Web Jam with the Design Thinkers Academy, with the Design Thinkers community, which then also ended up to be really the last working thing. And when I came out of that webinar and we were having dinner, I could see that he really could not have difficulties even swallowing the dinner. And the moment that he had a feeling that he also could not breathe anymore, I was like, okay. He actually turned to me and said, you know, you call 111 now, 112 now. So we did. The ambulance came very quickly, and at that point they were actually shocked that we did not call them before, because it was worsening rather quickly. Like, his way of talking was terrible. It really looked like as if he was drunk, so they kept asking us, did you drink? And we're like, yeah, he didn't drink. So eventually they took him immediately with them, and then at the hospital they immediately did CT scan, blood test, but those all came back clean, so they excluded immediately that it would be TIA, which was the initial thought, stroke, or tumor. In the meantime, as the kids went to sleep, because then also all of this happened with the kids at home, as they went to sleep, I started doing my own research, and pretty quickly I came through botulism, which is a rare but serious illness caused by the Clostridium botulinum bacteria that produces a toxin that attacks the body nervous system and causes difficult breathing, muscle paralysis, and even death if you don't get the antitoxin on time. I sent a WhatsApp to my husband asking him to tell about it to the doctors. He did. He replied to me, they have it on their radar. And I didn't think about it anymore. The following day, Thursday the 10th, the neurologist visit confirmed that nerves 3, 6, and 12 were not functioning. Basically, it was the eyes, the mouth, and some muscle responsible for the swallowing in the throat. The first EMG in English did not show any anomalies, although I must say at that point I didn't even know he had an EMG, so that's also something I learned later. It was very difficult to stay up to speed with all the tests done or not, and I wish that there would be more transparency on that along the entire timing. They also decided that he needed an MRI and a lumbar puncture to get cerebral liquor and understand what was going on, but there was no place for it on Thursday, so he had to wait for the Friday. In the meantime, I felt, this was getting serious. I must say at the very beginning of the week, I thought, oh, you know, just a bit of blurred vision. I was trying to dramatized, but on Thursday I started to realize, okay, this might be serious. I need all the prayers that I can have. So I asked for prayers in my network, and I also started to update my friends. I had a group that I had created a few years before when I turned 30, and we organized a painting session. So and every now and then I use that group. So I recollect that group, and I started updating them there and ask for support, which is something I tend not to do, not ever really, but definitely not so soon. But in Insight, I'm so glad that I immediately started to update my friends. On the Friday 11th, talking became more difficult, and my husband was only eating soups. The ice had started to drop even more. In the morning, they did the MRI, and they came back clean. So they excluded the tumor, MS, and the SLA, which were also in the potential diagnosis syndrome. And finally, at 4:30 in the afternoon on a Friday, they did the lumbar puncture to get the fluid from the spine to check for Miller-Fisher antibodies, which was at that point the most suspected diagnosis, and to check his proteins level. But also here the liquid came back clean. They could not find proteins or inflammation. And for the antibodies, the test had to go to a special laboratory in Rotterdam. And here also another major first process issue that I noticed with the Insight afterwards. The Erasmus of Rotterdam only does that specific test on a Monday. By getting the fluid on Friday afternoon at 4:30, then we're not sure how did they send it to Rotterdam, but basically it did not arrive on time for the Monday cycle of test, so it had to wait the following Monday. So we wasted 10 full days for that test, while if there would be proper process, proper software usage and information, they would know that the test happens on Monday morning, maybe at 9, and then they would arrange for quicker transportation, or they could even ask me, can you drive to Rotterdam and bring it? I would have done it, but that information, that flow was not there. So we just wasted 10 days by missing that window. And once they have done that lumbar puncture, they could start with the most recommendable treatment, which at that point was intravenous immunoglobulin therapy, which treats Guillain-Barré syndrome, Miller-Fisher, but also any other autoimmune issue. So at that point, we knew that if it was Guillain-Barré syndrome, we knew it might and most likely going to get worse before it got better. And we were hopeful because we knew if it's this, it's a self-limiting disease. So it's going to be really bad for a few weeks, but then it will get better. I still believe at that point on Friday that he would be home by the Sunday evening or so. Also somehow for very maybe kind of communication from the nurses, which said, yeah, during this immunoglobulin treatment, he can also just go home. He doesn't need to be here. But eventually it started worsening, so there was no coming home anytime soon. So at that point, I also I hadn't told much to the kids yet. I was still doubting whether to get my mom, but luckily I thought, okay, better to have mom support than not. So I booked on the Friday a flight for my mom to come on the Sunday to support me. And the kids, the only communication at that point was actually on the Thursday morning. My youngest one asked me, where is Dad? Because in his mind, so he had experienced already that I got taken away with the ambulance actually in January last year, because I had problem with my heart, unfortunately, following the vaccination. So I got taken away with the ambulance, but I got all my tests overnight, And by the time he woke up the following morning, I was already back home. So he pointed it out. It was like, Mom, when you left with the ambulance, you were already back home by the time I woke up. Why is that here? Not. And I could only say, yeah, he needs some extra tests, so and some extra care, so he needs to be there. And my oldest one wasn't really asking much, so when I actually asked him, don't you want to know more? He said, no, Mom, I don't need to. He's in the hospital and he's gonna get better. That's what people do when they go in the hospital. They get better and they get taken care of. So it's fine. And also later, I have to say, his attitude was always, there are a lot of people in the hospital and now it's my dad. So it's those things happen. I was really like, wow. So he had a very, very, mature attitude to it. But back to the story. On Saturday the 12th, the swallowing and the talk got really worse. The walking started to be more difficult, and also my husband had to do every 4 hours and blowing type of test to keep track of the capacity of the breathing capacity of the nerve, because the dangerous thing at this point is that if it was Miller-Fisher syndrome, it goes from the top down. So the nerves paralysis is progressive, and at some point, if your breathing nerves become paralyzed, you either have to be intubated and you have to be intubated quick enough not to have consequences. So that's what he kept doing. At that point, all we could do was to wait, pray, and stay very optimistic. I was absolutely thankful that at that point my friend offered, shall I just pick up the kids so you can have the Saturday afternoon, evening for yourself, and I'll bring them back to you on the Sunday evening, so also when your mom comes you can enjoy time together and you don't have to worry about the kids at all. While at the beginning I thought, this might not be necessary. I was still thinking this whole thing will be over in a week or two, but I accepted the help and I was so happy afterwards that I did, because then that really helped in the long term. So I could have the entire afternoon just focused on myself and my husband, going back and forward from home, relaxing, also cleaning up a bit the house, because in all of this we had just done, we had redone the roof of our house, putting in some windows, which meant we had taken away all of the furniture from my office and the other 2 rooms next to me, my husband's office and my son's room, and we had put most of this furniture downstairs in our sleeping room. So all of this stuff had to come back upstairs. So there was a lot to be done. And then on the Sunday 13th, I could also take the time to go calmly, to wake up in my own timing and then go calmly to the hospital and then to pick up my mom. In the meantime, on the Sunday, I found my husband doing still worse. So the symptoms were really going down. He was having challenges with his neck, with his arms, and the swallowing was already no longer possible, so they had and the walking was no longer possible. The blowing score were much lower, so they also that day they already decided to put a sonda in his nose, so that all the feeding was going through the sonda. And then in the evening, they decided to move him preventively to the intensive care unit, so that if they needed to intubate him, they could do it right away without having to first move it. I'd say at that point he was incredibly stressed about this idea of being intubated, so that was I think for him the most stressful moment. And he kept doing all of his best to really prepare himself even before he would have to blow into the test, to really make sure that he would keep up that value. So then my mom came and I had this lovely morning with my mom, like lunch with my mom, so that there were still those moments in which I was taking care of myself. Monday the 14th, It felt like that was what appeared to be the worst day up until that point. He had completely closed eyes. He could not talk anymore. He could not sit or stand on his own. He was really mostly just moving the hands and the arms and the legs while laying. I kept repeating just encouraging message to him and keep complimenting him for all of the breathing efforts that were paying off. I also had together with his family the first meeting with intensivists, because then once you move to the intensive care unit, different doctors become responsible. So with the intensivist, at that point they informed us that they really were convinced at this point that it was the Miller-Fisher syndrome, and that the only therapy possible was this immunoglobulin, which had been started on Friday. So by Monday it was already day 4, and it's a 5-day therapy. But they said there is no way that they could say what the prognosis was, because it depended from so many different factors. At that point, his family asked about revalidation and in which potential revalidation center he would go, which was something which was kind of for me already the first cold shower, because I had not been thinking that far. I was still in a very as optimistic as possible attitude. He needs to get out of here as soon as possible, and I was thinking, and he will come straight home. So that also was the point where I had to start to think, okay, now maybe it's time that I do start to say something to the kids. So the way I did that was on that evening when I came back home. What we did, I showed to them 10 minutes of the episode about the nervous system from Once Upon a Time live, which is a series which I used to love, and I saw that all, and I read all of the books when I was a kid. So I explained to them that what their dad had was a temporary dysfunction of those neurons, which had started on Wednesday and was going up and down, and we just could not foresee when it would be better, but that it was most likely something that would be disappearing as quickly as it had arrived. I told them about all the different tubes that were in the room, because especially my little one really was like, but I really, really want to see that, and I want to see him now. So I thought, okay, let's first look at the photo. And then once I show it to them, they were like, oh, you know, Mom, you go, you bring him our best regards and wishes for a quick recovery, and you tell him that we're gonna go when he has no cables anymore, when he's in a room without cables, which made me smile there, makes me smile now reading it back. And then they just jumped on their iPad, and that was that's the simplicity. You gotta love, to some extent, the simplicity with which the kids seem to take it. Then, you know, went back to visit my husband. At the time I was really going back and forward all the time as much as I could, and then back home like at 8 o'clock in the evening. My son remember himself that he needed to make an assignment for his school. He had to dress up as somebody in the golden age. So we did that and made something really fun for his photo skills, and it kind of, those were the things where you say, oh, did you really have to put so much energy in it? And like, yeah, at the end they were the distraction moment, and they allowed to maintain some sort of normality for the kids, because when I didn't do it later, I really felt like, or I, especially my little one, which is the most sensible, kept telling me, oh, Mom, but you didn't focus on us enough. So it was good that whenever I had the energy, I still took the chance for all those moments. Then we are on Tuesday the 15th. This is, so again, Monday the 14th I felt was the worst day at that point, and on the 15th, when I went to see my husband, he could actually open his eyes again and say a few words, and he actually could see me, so he did not have double vision. So I really hoped that Monday the 14th was the day where we had hit the rock bottom, because with this Miller-Fisher syndrome you have this so-called nadir, which is the bottom point, and after that it starts to improve. And Tuesday was also the last day of therapy. And here already was a day where my little one, for example, had a burst in the morning because he thought that my Sinterklaas gift, because in the Netherlands it was Sinterklaas period, we're putting gifts in the shoes, and he thought they were just not good enough, and I was being a very triste Sinterklaas. So when in the evening I came back home and he asked, "Oh, how is Dad doing today?" And I said, "Yeah, he's doing better." His joke of the day was like, "Oh, great! Now let's hope that those Sinterklaas presents get better as well." So it's like, okay. Wednesday the 16th, I started the morning with a very worried message from my husband. He had not slept through the night because of this continuous blowing test, and he really seemed in a lot of distress. So I ran to the hospital in the morning, even before visiting time. But by the time I arrived, he felt like he just needed some emotional support. I was with him during also the neurologist visit. He seemed like he could do again quite few movements, so they seemed to agree that on Monday he may have reached the lowest point and now it was getting better, and they even told me, and if he actually continues like this, he may just leave the intensive care by the end of today or tomorrow. So I was like, oh, this is getting great. So I went to the back to the daily life. It was Wednesday. I had signed up for being one of the parents supporting with the creative program. So I was doing intuitive painting with kids. I managed to get my mom help. So we did the intuitive painting session with the kids. So I was really also very aware at this moment that by all of those things, there was really a lot of dopamine and adrenaline that were really fueling me up on all of this. But I was very aware that I still have to keep a good balance of energy in all of this. And then after lunch, I get the phone call from the hospital that actually my husband isn't doing well and whether I could go because actually they needed to proceed with intubation. And that was really the moment where things started to go pretty much down again. So I went to the hospital at that time. Eventually my husband had convinced that was, he had actually no choice. He had done his best possible, but his breathing capability were failing. The balance between CO2 and carbon dioxide was off, and they just needed to intubate him. So that's what they did. But at that point, I really was like, okay, this is not consistent with Miller-Fisher or Guillain-Barré, which is supposed to be monophase. What has also had happened was that on the Monday 14th, they had made us sign a paper to approve using his info for a so-called GBS mimics study conducted by the Erasmus University. So a study which looks at all of the illness that look like GBS, but they are not. And when I had gone back also searching on those keywords, then I'd find a lot of medical papers saying how often botulism is misdiagnosed because it's assumed it is Miller-Fisher when it's not. So so at this point I was like, okay, he is actually not improving after the immunoglobulin treatment. He's had this up and down which was not supposed to be there. He got intubated. I was like, did they actually ever tested him for botulism? So that was there where the if you say like the most challenging part of it all started, because my husband started to be feeling worse. Also the communication with him, once he got intubated, he could not talk anymore, so it became incredibly a minimum. And then there was this additional stress of not knowing if they tested him or not. So Thursday 17th, after the intubation, he had been also in a sort of pharmacological coma, fully narcotized until the morning, 10 a.m. By when I went, he had just started to come back. So he waved his feet when I entered the room. And all he could do was to answer my questions with a thumbs up or thumbs down or other hand signs when he really disagreed. And that for me was really the first moment where I really started to feel like, crying. It was really a day of fear, anger, sadness, and a bit of this desperation. So I also really started to ask for speaking to a doctor. So I started to ask the nurse, was the botulism test being done, yes or no? But I just didn't seem to get any answer. They didn't know. So it was just, not, I wasn't getting my answers. At the same time, also it was starting, there was in the evening, there was the first secondary school info evening for parents, because my oldest son is in the change between primary school and secondary school. So I had to put that husband worries on the side and go instead to the info evening, and that was the main focus for the evening. Friday 18th was one of the most frustrating days because the nurses kept dismissing me, and when I kept asking for a question like I really want to see a doctor now, they sent instead in the geestelijk begeleider, basically the spiritual support type of person. It's a wonderful function. I found it remarkable that the hospital has that function to support mentally and emotional the members of the family, but it was just the wrong moment. I'm like, if at some point there is such a situation and the partner of the patient is asking for a doctor, you should give them a doctor. So that's the chat that I had with spiritual support, which was very understanding and very lovely woman. Eventually she got through to me to talk to the neurologist, which once the patient is in the intensive care unit is a bit more difficult. So eventually I had that appointment, but this neurologist on shift had no clue if they had done the botulism test or not, because making things complicated was the fact that also nearly every day there was a different neurologist on shift, especially in the ICU, which is not the neurologist word. So it was very difficult to speak with somebody that really knew the whole thing. Then once back home for lunch, the dishwasher broke, because that's what happens, life keeps happening. So the dishwasher broke. I called in a repair. So I went to the Zamsad Mamas group on Facebook, which I'm part of, which I lead, and got a recommendation. Called in the repair guy. I was super thankful that he came right away. But unfortunately, he could not repair the dishwasher. However, he arranged to call the local shop to see if and which dishwasher they had on stock, which could be delivered on the same day. So it got me connected, and eventually we arranged for the delivery of a new dishwasher to come just a few hours later. It was a Friday afternoon after all. But what also happened in that moment was that the moment that we opened up the baseboard under the kitchen furniture, I discovered there were lots and lots of mouse droppings, and also, you should have heard my screaming, 3 dead mouses on a trap that my husband had placed months, I don't know, long before, without checking it. So it's like, there is one thing I cannot stand, is mouses. So I was in shock and screaming. I was like, oh, and it made me even extra worried, because I was already back into this thinking of botulism, and I was like, what if the botulism bacteria was carried in our house through those mouses, their droppings, whatever. And then I went to try and move we have a camper van outside our house. I wanted to move it so that the guy could come with the dishwasher, but the camper van battery was off. So, all this little life happening. So the dishwasher guy arrives, and I worry, like, can you carry it? He was like, no worries, I can manage it also through the space that there is. And then I say, I also have to tell you that there are 3 dead mouses under our fridge. And I was like, do you still want to work in our house? I was like, hey, yo, don't worry. God, I love the Dutch auntie. Was like, no worries, I see them very often when I go doing this, so not to worry. So that was incredibly uplifting for me. First of all, that the owner of the shop arranged for it to happen on the same day, that the guy came in and was so friendly and so okay, even with dead mouses, that he actually took them away from me. So it's like he is the one that took care of taking those dead mouses away. But at that point, I called back up the hospital to say, hey, this also happened, which really makes me think even more that it's botulism. Can I please speak to a doctor which knows whether this bloody botulism test was done or not? And at that point, the nurse that I got on the phone was just very dismissive. It totally did not know how to handle the stress that I had at that point. I was highly stressed and I really needed empathy. But what I got from him was, I'm sorry, you are too agitated, so I'm just not gonna keep this conversation. I'm gonna close now, and you can call your GP instead, And he actually closed the conversation, which completely made me flip. Anyway, eventually, just at 4 o'clock, just while I was on the way to the hospital for the visiting hours, the intensivist finally calls me and tells me that they actually never tested my husband for botulism because the last case in the Netherlands was in 2016, so they just thought it's too rare for it to be happening, we just are not gonna test it. Which also made me, really, really shocked, because I'm like, but this is not a reason. I mean, it's like, also we are an Italian family. So in the meantime, I learned that botulism comes a lot from things that are conserved under oil, like mushrooms, like artichokes can be vegetables kept under oil. But in the Netherlands, it can also come from tuna, into bleaks, from mascarpone, from a lot of things, from liver, and a lot of things that we consume in our house. And a lot of things, quite a few things that my husband had consumed in the weekend before getting sick. And also because he had started an anti-tox treatment, which has antimicrobial properties. So there were a lot of things which were potential triggering for botulism, and that for me. And we had also just been on holidays in Italy, so I was like, it's not possible that you just don't test it, and we had the mouses. So there was a lot of discussions, but I was like, I was really conflicted. What do I do? Do I keep fighting for this or not? Because from one side, my husband was also asking me to let it go, to just have patience and trust, and not to keep digging and asking. On the other side, I was also very aware that already 12 years ago, when my father got sick with cancers, I had taken it on myself, the responsibility for his health and for his progresses, rather than leaving it to the doctors, and that had really broke me. So I didn't want that to happen again. Lastly, the other thing also that I still did a bit in this time was to take as many chances for a good laugh as possible. So on this specific day, one thing that's funny that happened was that when the repair guy, which was a pretty old guy, came to repair the dishwasher and could not be repaired anymore, my mom asked me in Italian, which doesn't specify he, it, or she. She asked me, how old is it? How old is? How many years? And I was like thinking, she was thinking about the guys. I was like, what do you care how old is the guy? I don't know. Should I even ask him if he's married or not, And my mom was like, but I don't mean about the guy. I mean the dishwasher. Who cares about the old guy? And we just kept laughing and laughing. And those little things were the things that we still cherished in all this drama. So also linked to laughter yoga, we don't laugh when we are happy, but we find moment to laugh in every situation, because that also releases the tension. Anyway, so on Friday 18th, despite that laugh, I had really broke down with all the stories with the nurses. And I was also very upset from some of the messages that in the meantime my husband had started to writing, because he could not communicate with his words. So what he was doing, he was just writing, and I had started to use those notebook from HSA or from my past in Adobe that are very sturdy, and that they were really helpful for him to write. And he had written some sentences like, oh, stop asking all those questions to them, they have to nurse me, not you, which I took them very, very personally and very badly. So on Saturday 19th was the first day where I did the first session with fellow alumni students from the Happiness Studies Academy, and also happiness game facilitator, which you will meet in one of the next episodes. And she's also an EFT coach, so emotional freedom technique. Again, we'll explore it in one of the next episodes. It's really a technique which allows us to be aware of our feelings, and especially when they are very strong emotion, give them space and cleanse them through. I did a session in that morning, and it really helped me process all of those painful emotion, but even more turning them into love and compassion, especially also towards my husband in that situation, rather than being upset about his messages. Besides that, then on Saturday morning there are kids sports dues. So while my youngest son went to karate, which he can go by foot, I brought my oldest one to Boulderen, and since Boulderen is next to the hospital, we first went to the hospital, asked him to wait outside. I had not brought the kids at this point yet, because in the meantime my husband had even got intubated, so it was even more tubes. But when I went in and told my husband that actually our son was waiting outside, he gave me the sign to bring him in. So I checked in with my son if he was ready to go and see him. He did. And what was also very contributing here was that the nurse on shift happened to be the mother of a schoolmate from my youngest son, and she was lovely. So it made the entire meeting very actually spontaneous, and she even covered some of the areas where there were needles that especially my oldest son is more sensible to. And really then, the emotion and the joy in the eyes of my son in seeing his father for the first time was really incredible. I then brought him to his sport. I went to pick up his brother from karate so that he could also see his father, and they let us do that even shortly after their visiting hours, which was great. So both kids were extremely happy to have seen their father and had their one-on-one time. They both reacted in very completely different way. My oldest one was very silent all the time and just looking with those teary eye, while my youngest one was only blah, 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 telling his father every possible story at the fastest speed possible. But they both had the same comment, which was, "Oh, mom, but he looks so much better than we had imagined," which made me think like, oh my god, what did you guys could possibly imagine that would look worse than this? So that was that in the morning. When it comes to my husband, there were no improvements. And in fact, I could see him in mere more sufferance, especially when I went to visit him in the afternoon and in the evening. I could really see him sweaty. I could see all of his heart rate, blood pressure, oxygenation, all the values were extremely off. So while the previous day had kind of thought, okay, you know what, maybe I should let it go, they decided not to test him, that's their responsibility, not mine. By seeing him so worst on the Saturday, I was really like, I don't know that I can really, I don't think I can really let go of this. I mean, it's really like they should be testing because the major problem is, if it would be botulism, the only therapy in that case is to provide him with the antitoxin, and the antitoxin should even be provided within the first 48 hours, because the later, once you give the antitoxin, it does not reverse the damage, it just stops the damage, and then your body has to rebuild all of the connections that were destroyed. So the later you give it, the longer it still takes to recover. So eventually on that evening, again, I saw him doing so bad. So before I left, I asked the nurse, why do I see those values so bad? Why is he having higher heart rate, higher blood pressure, lower oxygenation? And at that point, that nurse went, oh, we know what you are doing, just leave it to us, and stop asking all those questions, which was so dismissive, and so, it was like, for me, awful. So that is when I really had my second breakdown, because at that point I was like, I really want to speak to a doctor. And then it was 48, my husband wanted to go to sleep, so the nurse went, oh, you know what, instead of going and take care of your husband now, I'm then gonna go and call the doctor. Which I was like, no, this is not what I'm asking, like, please go take care of my husband, and once you're done, let me speak to a doctor, help me speak to a doctor. It became like a really fighting moment. So I left it, I went outside in the waiting room, I started doing EFT in the fastest way that you can imagine, because I had again a meltdown, but then I managed to calm myself down, and I went back into my husband. Once I went home, it was really the first evening where the tiredness that I felt was not enough to make me sleep. In the meantime, I was continuously sharing everything into the WhatsApp group with my dearest friend. So one friend had offered to pick up the kids the following the Sunday, take them to Nemo, and the other one, a Dutch one, had offered me to come with me to speak with the doctors together with me the following day, to make sure that they would get this test. And also during the night, when I came down to call my husband, to call the ICU to check how my husband was doing, because that's also another great thing from the hospital. As a contact person, you can call at any time. But actually, while I was calling, I had those mouses, a live one, running around me. So I was really, in that moment, it was like, oh my god, I have a mouse infestation. Finally, on the Sunday, the 20th, my friend came to the station to pick up my kids, but she presented herself. She works in healthcare, so she took with her the clinical guidelines for diagnosis and treatment of botulism by the CDC, and on the main page she had even written down on which page there was what. So on page 7, botulism and GBS diagnosis and what are the differences, and then she had also highlighted the key areas that had to be read, so that really with this one we could go to the doctors and say, look, this is what it says, you need to do the botulism test, and you actually have to give the antitoxin without even waiting for the test results. So I could go with that, and with my Dutch friend, we went to speak to the doctors. We had this meeting. The nice nurse from the days before was also there, and she helped us get through. And finally, on that Sunday, the test for botulism got started, but of course, they take time. So that was the Sunday. On the Monday, kids were off school, so my oldest one went again to visit his father, and for me, I finally had the relief of, I've done everything I could with the test as running. Now we just have to wait for the results also of the lumbar liquor that were due on the Tuesday, finally after 10 days delay. So in the evening, I went for a massage, and Tuesday the 22nd, I had this full time at the almost full day at the hospital. By then, my husband was doing much worse. Basically, he was just laying in the bed, completely paralyzed in his face, almost completely paralyzed in his arms and legs. He could still just move his hands and his feet, but not much more. Eventually, in the afternoon, finally had the meeting with the intensivist and the neurologist, and they shared that the results from the antibodies test that had been sent to the Erasmus finally came back, and they came back negative. So the antibodies were negative, the proteins were negative, they basically had absolutely nothing confirming that he had Miller-Fisher or Guillain-Barré. So that was really like the challenging moment for me, where I really had to fight and say, okay, that's it. Now it's not enough for me that you did the test for botulism, because we cannot wait. It would take 2 weeks to have the results of the botulism test. We just cannot wait. I want you now to give him the antitoxin as well. And again, after lots of arguing, demanding, consultation, and all, finally at 8 o'clock in the evening, this special antitoxin, which has to come from a special center, arrived. It had duty freeze, and at midnight they could finally start giving the antitoxin. And so we are on Wednesday, 23rd. I go to visit my husband, and for the first time, about 8 hours after he had received the antitoxin, I see the first improvements. He could do this arms movement again with a heart sign and a thank you sign, moving this part of the arm that I hadn't seen him moving in the last week. So that was for me a sign that things had started moving. Also, what we started to do in this week was to listen to a healing mantra called Ramada Sa Sa Se So Hang. I'll put the link in the show notes. And for me, it was truly amazing and remarkable to actually see on the screen how his values were really changing and improving while the mantra was playing. It was a mantra that I had just learned during the laughter yoga retreat I had done in September, and that the people with which I did the course reminded me during this illness to just listen to it together, and it worked. So Wednesday 23rd was also the first day that I came out of the hospital with a smile again, and with a red line on my arm. So I had a very big red line on my right hand, and I was like, I didn't remember hitting something. I was like, that's very strange. On Thursday 24th, I wake up hardly being able to move my right hand. So I put a scarf around my neck, and I really had the feeling that I had to hold my hand in a resting position. I quickly looked a bit also online. It looked like I could have the Querine syndrome, like basically a tendinitis, but I had no time to see anybody, so I just did the quick fix in depth, and I went to see my husband. It was doing slowly improving. In the afternoon they did a new EMG, and out of this EMG, and they said that because in this EMG they saw signs of demyelinization, that was for them a reason to say that actually was Guillain-Barré and not botulism, even though they could not confirm Miller-Fisher. For me, that was also a big hit, and as I say, I did add also here what I call the third meltdown, for two reasons. One, I did not expect that diagnosis, and I felt like, is it really? I mean, I could really see that this improvement just happened after the antitoxin, and I had read in the CDC guidelines that when you are in the ICU to do the EMG, it's very difficult, and the results are rather unreliable, and they can be very similar to the GBS one. So for me, I was still not convinced. Also, at that point, again, some of the members of the family mentioned, oh, but you know, this is anyway gonna take just very, very long. And for me, that very, very long was not something that I was ready to handle. I just did not have it in me. So to hear other people saying, oh, we're canceling Christmas plan, and almost as if they expected my husband to be in that same condition even a month later, for me was just it was not something I was able to handle in that moment. On Friday the 25th, all the improvements kept happening, so little by little he could start to reopen a bit his eyes, move more his arms, so there were all those gradually every day a small improvement. And that is when on Friday the 25th I mentioned, so if he keeps like that we might remove him from the intubation, but we don't want to do that too quicker before he's ready. And then on 26th I actually get the phone call that the intensivist has decided to try and detubate him. So I go there again with my son, all happy, on the way to his sport, but already they had just detubated him since half an hour and said that actually he's having really a lot of difficulties, so if he continues like that we might have to retubate him. I bring my son to the sport, I come back, and I find them, actually we are now urgently retubating him, so they start to put in again all sorts of cables. And then this was again another major stressful experience for me, because then what happened was the moment they decided, okay, we need to retubate him now, because he's not breathing, he does not have enough power to keep breathing on his own. There was another emergency, and suddenly everyone disappeared, so it was just me and my husband left in his room while he was really focused on trying to keep the breathing going on, but nobody around. And every now and then he would ask me, so where are they, can you check, he would press, but nobody would come there. So for me that was yet another moment of big stress, and also I'm like, I can imagine that emergency can happen, but I mean, what's the point of trying to do such a procedure like detubation on a Saturday, just 3 days after the first improvement? So it felt that there was again something that broke in the process when you know that you are limited on staff and another emergency can happen. Eventually they retubated him again, and then the following 2 days were just about exhaustion from that 1 hour extra trying to breathe on his own when he hardly had any strength. And for me it was again a lot of EFT, getting over this one more trauma too. What happened from this point on is that every single day there were small improvements, because they had tried the detubation and it didn't work. It's not that they could try it once more. So what they decided at that point was to plan a tracheostomy. So it means instead of having the tube from the mouth, they would have it plugged in directly into the trachea. So that's what they did on Thursday, the 1st of December. And from that moment on, it was all about having to try and sit down for half an hour, trying and breathe in on his own for short amount of time. Another key thing that I forgot to mention earlier was that when I moved my arm anymore, I had pain in my arm. Just a day before, I had received a message from a colleague of Matthew saying, any help that you need, I live close by, so just let me know. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna take that help as well, because instead all my dearest friends, they don't live close by. So I asked him to drive me to one of the info info evening for parents of the schools. It was far away and I could not drive. And what was beautiful that he came and also had a small gift in one of those flexible packaging, but a digitally printed one. So it's something that my husband company makes. And in this bag there was a beautiful card about hope and a lovely message for me and for my husband, but also recognize with a lot of empathy and acknowledgement of what I was also going through and how I was being the rock for my husband. And there was this little beautiful star stress ball for my husband, which just happened to be actually just the day before I had received the request from the hospital to buy for him a stress ball, and instead I had taken some of the stress balls that I had at home, and this one actually was much better for him, so it was very spot on present. But also what happened, because of this card, I actually asked the phone number of this colleague that I didn't even know. I reached out to say thanks, and then there was really a very connecting friendship and support that blossomed out of that. So when I started to have, I had all those pain with my hands at the same time, and it turned out to be a tendinitis for iPhone over usage, because for the first 2 weeks all I was doing was being on my iPhone, researching everything, sending updates to everybody, and at the same time the smart keyboard of my iPad had broken. So on Friday the 2nd of December I eventually have time to go all the way to a Cool Blue shop in Amsterdam, as advised, after an hour on the phone with an Apple support representative. So I go there, and actually turns out they cannot repair the keyboard, despite the fact that I had seen online it's a known a software issue of the keyboard that after a certain version doesn't connect anymore. Anyway, so that was a reason why I'm mentioning it here. It was like, that was the big bad interaction with company, where I thought, I'm going through so much, and then wasted an hour on the phone, wasted an hour in the shop, wasted an hour back and forward, and still don't get the keyboard issue resolved. But that's where the colleague from my husband stepped in, and she said, don't worry, send me the model. She went on Mark Plaza, looked it up for me, found a cheap used one that got shipped directly to my house, and really helped me solve those small problem. On the Sunday, again, some friends offered to take on my kids to go to a playground, and next to this playground there was a massage place, so my friend also booked for me a massage session. So I managed to keep this balance of still finding some small moments for myself to keep my energy up. And I especially selected massage, because massage is a great way for us through touch to get oxytocin. So not only it relaxes all of our muscle, but it also helps us produce oxytocin. So on Monday the 5th of December, it's Sinterklaas in the Netherlands. So here what was very beautiful is that the nurses really helped versiering, like adobate the room of my husband with all sorts of Sinterklaas things. They even have a gift for my kids, and the colleague helped preparing an entire Sinterklaas sack with all those gifts for the kids, and even some gifts for myself, and gifts from my mom, which was very, very helpful. And then finally on Tuesday the 6th, as my husband kept improving, I finally made myself time to go to the physiotherapist myself, and I discovered I had a tendinovaginitis, and I needed a wrist splint or brace, which was made of measure, and it was much bigger than this one. It got until half of my right arm, and then it got shortened later, so that would put really my thumb at rest, because the major issue was with my thumb. I had really seriously damaged some joints between my thumb and my palm, and I can tell you it really took more than 8 weeks to fully recover. So I find it really remarkable when something in our body breaks, it really takes a lot of time to recover. So the message here is prevention, prevention, prevention. And at the same time, I kept doing my daily practices. The only other big highlight here is also that what happened was that on Thursday, the 8th of December, as my husband kept doing all those little progresses every day, instead I catch the Australian flu, and I couldn't go to visit him anymore until Sunday 11, when I was forced to go to the hospital because I got hit by yet another life, they call it fireball, you could say. So 2 colleagues of my husband were coming by to help with moving this furniture that still had to move. And as my mom stand up to make one of them coffee, she actually felt dizzy. She said, sorry, I'm not feeling well, went on the couch, and suddenly she actually fainted, but with convulsion, shaking her entire body in a way I'd never seen, and then going completely wood still. So that was another awful moment for me. I really felt I lost her. It's not something I shared on social media or my kids know, so that's also them to protect them. And luckily they're not listening to my podcast. But that was an incredibly scary moment where I really thought I had lost her. We called 112. The ambulance came again at home. They brought her to the hospital. But eventually they could not find anything wrong with her. So she also went through the test. She was really in a room just 3 floors below the room of my husband. So once she felt better, eventually went to say hello to my husband, but without sharing all the details. But luckily we did do say it, because turns out the following morning one of the neurologists did ask, was like, "Wow, actually your wife was here with her mom." I was like, "Yeah." But yeah, apparently it was just low blood pressure and maybe lots of stress. But that for me was another major stress point, and really like a moment where also like having my friends around was really of support, and we were really I was really like, and we created a new term, which is what the AHF, like what the actual Holy F. And what really helped me for me was that like on the evening at 10 o'clock when I was back home, I reached out to my EFT coach and booked a special session on the following morning first thing, and we went through the EFT process together. And I can tell you, I'm like, it's incredible. It's really like while I'm learning all of those practices, and while heart coherence keeps the balance. It's like I don't know, it's like the daily food, the daily nutrition. And laughter yoga helps me see the funny side of everything, and to really laugh also when there is nothing to laugh about. EFT, I'm like, it's like the defibrillator of the emotion. It's really like incredibly powerful, and I can't wait to tell you more in the next episode. Also, what happened at this point is that in the meantime, the results from the botulism test eventually came back. I learned it via phone because I was sick at home, from the neurologist, and they were positive. So they did find the botulism bacteria in the stool, but they could not find the toxin in the blood, which is normal because you cannot find the toxin if you 2 weeks later. The toxin, you only find it in the blood within the first couple of days. But so finding it for them in the stool was not enough to give that as diagnosis. So eventually, again, long story short, in the following days, it was every day small progresses. So on Monday 12th, so skipping here to the really key milestone, on Monday 12th of December, so exactly a bit more than a month after the symptom had started, my husband could stand up for the first time for a few seconds, with all the intensivists and all the nurses all witnessing this special moment. And for me, that was also the one moment where instead I realized, oh my God, if on the 12th of December, all he can do is to stand for a few seconds, all of the promises I made for my kids that he would be home for Christmas, or at the very latest for the 31st of December, which is my oldest son's birthday, this isn't gonna happen. So that was also the moment where it all started falling on me. So I very much remember on Tuesday the 13th, I had every morning this 7:30 o'clock morning call with my laughter yoga teachers from the course I did. We meet every morning at 7:30 and we laugh together for 10 minutes. All I could do that morning was to cry. I could not fake a smile. We say sometimes bring your body to smile and your mind and your mood will follow. All I could do that morning was to cry. And then, almost as if my husband knew it, when I went to the hospital on that Tuesday, it was the first time that there were actually so many major breakthrough. And I remember it was Tuesday the 13th because it's also Santa Lucia, which is a big saint in Italy. So for me, it was like, almost like a miracle, and all the prayers being listened. So that was the first day that it was for the full day without the breathing tube, breathing by himself. He could do the first 3 steps walking. He was sitting, so sitting by himself rather than being pulled up with an entire tool. So it was getting better and better. On Wednesday the 14th, I took time for myself with my mom, and we went cutting our hair. And once at the hospital, I found that my husband was getting a total shaving on his own because he was finally sitting properly on the chair. And then from Wednesday the 14th on, it was all improvement. So we had the first day and night without the oxygen support. We had the first few times without the deflated, without the balloon in his trachea. So once that balloon is deflated, then he can also talk. So he could finally talk again. He did then the first 6 meters walk from his bed to the room door. So it really felt okay. He might not be home for Christmas, but at least he might be home for the 31st. On the Sunday the 18th, while everywhere outside all the canals were frozen and we were having -degree, he got to go out on his wheelchair for the first time in 40 days for a few minutes to get a breath of fresh air. On Monday the 19th, he also started drinking. He started standing for a few minutes. He was sitting up to an hour, and he did the first 15 meters walk. And finally, on Wednesday 21st, after 38 in the ICU, he left the intensive care unit, and we went to the neurology ward, where we finally had also the first talk with the neurologist in 2 weeks. So we spoke about the diagnosis. I had all sorts of questions, but once she gave the diagnosis, I went back home and I studied again. So on Friday the 23rd, I went back with all my questions, but that was the first time where the neurologist said, enough, you're not my patient, he is. So I'm done answering your questions, which kind of was yet another meltdown for me. Yeah, because it's like what I really discover in all this story, whenever I have the space for my emotions and also my questions, as many as they are, but once there is all of that, I can, the emotion go, and my, I guess, intellectual well-being is also taken care of with all my questions and as many answers as I can. And when not, that's the most difficult to manage. On the 27th, finally, he also managed to leave the hospital for Elio Mare. We were very lucky that there was a spot free pretty soon. So on the 27th of December, he left for the rehab center, where he stayed until the 31st of January. On the 31st of December, he did manage to come home for 1 night, so he could stay, could celebrate at home nice on birthday and New Year's Eve. And for the rest of the month of January, he would come home just in the weekend, from Friday evening to Sunday evening. And this is really now the entire chronicle of this very long journey story. And at this point, I would like to share with you what are the key things that depleted me during this period versus what are the things that actually have been enriching for me. So first, what has depleted or saddened me? First of all, the lack of direct visibility on all of the exam they had done and the results, so that I could actually properly work together with them to solve this big puzzle, or just when there is something like this, there is no control possibility, but having some visibility gives you at least the illusion of knowing what's going on, and it can provide some reassurance. And for me, while here I understand all of the possible concerns with privacy and everything, but what was also very challenging was my husband had given authorization for me to see everything, and even then there was no way where I could just access all the data directly. They actually had to put it the entire medical file on a USB stick. And once they provided me with this USB stick, there were two different files, one of 350 pages, the other one of 120 pages. Incredibly difficult to read because it was just very badly designed and formatted. And I'm like, there must be a better way of sharing this information. So it's like also the experienced designer in me, the design thinkers in me was really like, okay, this can and gotta be done better. Then there is the long time that it has taken to be heard. So not only there is no visibility, but then you ask for it, and it really takes so much time before you are heard and you are granted access to this information or to those additional exams, which actually should have been done way earlier. Then there is the all those failures that I noticed in the process, all those delays, all the things that could have been done better, and even the cost for the hospital that could have been prevented, because at the end, if it was botulism and they had given him the antitoxin from the very beginning, he would have completely skipped the entire month in the hospital, entire month in the rehabilitation. But we will never know because they did not do the test on time, and at the end there was this massive impact on us as a family and on the hospital from a cost point of view. So it's and I think it could have been prevented. Then there is also the big also misunderstanding and the complex communication with the nurses, with some of the doctors, with the rest of the family members. Especially when it comes to setting up expectations, or like, so what I learned is that there are other people that prefer to think this is going to take months or years and then be happier if it takes less. For me, I'm like the optimistic person, and there are two main reasons. One is, if I would be telling myself it's going to take a year, that weight is just so heavy that I found it suffocating. I could not be there thinking in November that it would still take 6 months and we would not be seeing him for Christmas or New Year's Eve. It was just too heavy for me, too heavy for the kids. And the other thing is also, from a neuroscience point of view, is the limits that you set for yourself, the belief that you have, that will define your reality. There is this big example of the Dream Mile, where everybody thought it could not be run below a certain limit, and they could not run it. And the one person that finally thought, I can run the Dream Mile in the below this amount of time, he did manage it. So it's your belief create your limitation. So I just really needed my husband to think that he would be home by New Year's Eve latest. And eventually, in a way, he managed to break those Dream Mile for us, which I'm extremely thankful and grateful to him for having had that power to believe in himself so much, and still now that he's recovering so much. What has also been depleting is that the nurses were just so dismissive, and sometimes they even seemed annoyed when I was asking all of this information. At the end, that one day where he was feeling really sick and sweating and so on, he actually had also pneumonia and influenza and bacteria, all things that they had forgotten to tell me. I could not see because I did not have direct access to the data. But actually, they were also the explanation why I was doing so bad. And if I had known it, or they had not forgotten to tell me, that the entire communication would have also been better. And then there is the fact that the nurse that I asked, can I please see a doctor, and instead send me this spiritual support, which would otherwise be a very fantastic offering, but it was the wrong moment. And I also want to share that in Yellow Goldfish, Stan and I dedicated an entire chapter to Yellow Factor Smile. And over this period, I also made that chapter available for free. So I'll also share in the show notes the link to it. because that chapter for us, it's all about gratitude. And in that chapter, we also share the story of Jim Moss, which was a gold medal winning athlete, which in 2009 got completely paralyzed from a very rare autoimmune disease. What I didn't know at the time of writing Yellow Goldfish was that actually also for him was Guillain-Barré syndrome. I only discovered it in November when reaching out to him. And in the book, we share the story of the morning nurse, which while Jim is taking a very painful, slow walk to the bathroom to try and get back up by himself, she tells me, oh, just get used to it. You're gonna be like this for a very long time. That also completely gutted and brought down Jim, while instead the evening nurse that on the very same day, while he was doing the very same thing, jovially told him, oh, don't you worry about it, sweetheart, you're gonna get back on your feet and your speed in no time. And those type of moments, those sentences that we hear or that sometimes we say without too much awareness, but those are the defining moments in our life. They can break us or they can advance us. And for me, in this entire period, I've really been thinking so much about those morning type nurses or friends or family members. And it's like, and for me, the questions that I kept pondering on is first, who do you want to be? The morning nurse or the evening nurse? The downing one or the uplifting one? Who do you want to have around you? Again, the thinking long-term one, downing one or the uplifting one. So the morning or the evening nurse. But also for me, a very big question is, how can we help the morning nurses too? How can we help also the people that have this more downy outlook? How can we help them become more optimistic, or at least understand how to talk to other people in a more optimistic way? So the book extract is available on wownow.eu/yellowfactorsmile. I'll have also a link in the show notes. So, and if this was what has been depleting or saddening me, there has also been so much that's been enriching me and has been contributing to my happiness in every possible way during this difficult time. First of all, really anyone that has been praying for us, sending caring private messages, emails, answers to my questions, comments on social media, or calling up to check how I was doing. While we are not used to it anymore, I actually very much welcomed in this period impromptu calls. There were few, but they arrived just in the moment where I needed the most, but I would not have picked up the phone to call anyone. So it was with calls, and so with emails. There is one that arrived on a evening on my work address, and specifically I said, I'm pretty sure you're not checking your work email at this time. And then there was really an outpouring of supporting and empathy and imagining how I could be possibly feeling in such a situation. And I actually read that email just few minutes later, because I was in my bed, not being able to sleep and not also knowing what to do. And I was kind of hysterically checking my phone for something that would help me sleep. And that email was it. And then there is, of course, my absolutely amazing network of friends, most of which ex-colleagues or fellow students from the many courses that I took, and how really each of them step up to help from their strengths and their expertise in the moment when each of them could. So at any moment there was at least one person available with her way, and her way was just what I needed in that moment, and it just flowed beautifully in a way. And it also very much also helped that instead of asking a big let me know if and when you need help, they actually proposed very actively, would it help if on Sunday I pick up the kids? Would it help if tonight I just take the kids and then bring them home? Shall I come to you and we can go for a walk in nature. Or shall we go out for dinner tonight and we can chat in a restaurant close to hospital. Those very, very practical things made me not having to do any thinking work when I did not have any brain space for it, and also not having to feel of weight to anyone. So it's like, yes, in the evening where I would have loved to have a dinner with my friend, but I knew she lived in Amsterdam, I would have never asked her, yeah, do you want to come all the way to Zandam? But the moment she said, shall we have dinner together and I can come to Zandam, then it was easier to say, yes, please, I would really, really love that. Also, little gifts, like I got a bunch of yellow flowers, I got a very super sweet card with a hug candle, like turn it on and feel like I'm hugging you. Or I have this, actually here, this bottle full of very positive words, which is also like a sun and a smile. I got sent special music tracks, tea bags, and you all the way from Sweden. Really, all those little things, they all helped me feel supported. And it's always, I look back at this image in my painting here behind me, it's like really that support of friends. It gives you that feeling of being carried. It also really helped me having started to ask for help very early on, which is really not my usual style, and really accept all the help that I could get, whether it was with talking to the doctors or taking the kids away for the weekend or making Santa Claus surprise with them, or going together to the secondary schools info evening, or with the EFT sessions and so on. Of course, it really enriched me the presence of my mom. It was really like an amazing support also, like that she was staying in the house with us, so I didn't even have to think whenever I had to run to the hospital. I knew she would be with the kids, and she took care of all the cooking, so that was great. Also, I've been keeping up my daily laughter yoga practice every single day on Zoom at 7:30 with a teacher with I did the teacher training course, and really smiling or crying, doing that every single day and having that appointment with them on Zoom really helped keeping the practices. While with art coherence it was a bit less, because art coherence, without having any more the daily, it was before a daily live on Facebook from my dear teacher Lara. She's now doing it once a week, so it's less of that. I got to be there for that moment and more having to do it on my own time. But still, I knew that I then embodied that way of breathing in and breathing out and connecting to the heart. So I knew that served me through as well. And there were the weekly Qigong session when I did not have to go to the info evenings, which were always on a Tuesday evening. The other thing that really, really supported me through this period was the EFT, so this emotional freedom technique, which we will be talking in depth in next episode. I knew this tapping practice existed, but I had not experienced it yet myself. And I can really say it's really incredible. It's the powerful way in which really you allow anger, frustration, sadness, feelings to just be there, and then you convert them into love and compassion in just 1 hour. Really incredible. Then there is also, having listened to Emiliano Toso translational music, I also hope to have Emiliano soon in one of the podcasts, and the healing mantra Rama Da Sasasoye Sohang from the Reiki practice, of which I didn't know much, so this is on my list of getting to learn more about Reiki and also bring more information on that in those podcasts. Then there is the support and respect received by my husband manager, which was asking for updates in the most felt care and respectful way, without ever asking for work handover, until I asked him, actually, I don't think Matthew has set up his out of office, so shall I arrange it for him? Shall I check through his emails if there is anything really critical? And can check through the emails, and it was really like his support was absolutely fantastic, as it was the support of all my husband colleagues. They each also here each started to contribute in very different way, but each way was of a great contribution. So we had a colleague that sent us a daily short story via WhatsApp voice messages, because that was the only thing my husband I could just play it for him and he could listen to it rather than reading text. And those voice messages became something that he really looked forward to every day. And they were also like beautiful stories with a beautiful message behind it. Like one of my favorite is also the Chinese farmer. I'll share it with you at some point. Or the colleague that took care of arranging for me the iPad smart keyboard that had this beautiful card, and that has been taking care of the Santa Claus gift for the kids, or getting us an office chair for the first weeks at home, and just so much more. Really, I'm so thankful for that support. And then there were the nurses and the doctors that were actually caring and understanding, the one that were listening to me and my question, gave it space for my emotions and took the time to respond fully, and the one, of course, that all of them really that took so much care of my husband. Also, what very much contributed are the nurses that made it so easy for my kids to see their father for the first time, and helped me get the botulism test finally done, and made me feel seen and helped. Also, what again contributed to me was the support of the small local businesses, like the one that came to fix the sink when the sink got broken, or the one that came to check the dishwasher and then arranged within the same day for a new dishwasher to come in, and then the delivery guy that took care of the 3 dead mouses. So all of this small support, they really made a lot of difference in such a critical moment. And then last couple of things, that was a big one, was also like really allowing myself to let the ball work fully drop. At beginning, I tried to keep it running, but then I realized, yeah, I actually there was no way. I was so busy with my husband and with everything that I know even in January, when my husband had to go in the rehab, I really felt, okay, I really need to take care. I need to take time. And we know also from Yellow Factor, we say that T is the T in growth, of happiness-driven growth. So what really contributed is that I eventually did take the time during the crisis for still walks and massage and some time for myself, and afterwards to really take extra time for recovery. Because we know also from positive psychology and the science of happiness that we can all handle stress as long as we also take time for recovery. And that's also the final thing that I want to share with you, is also, so as you know, I'm a student of Tal Ben-Shahar, and as a part of the Happiness Studies Academy, I also join whenever I can the weekly webinars that Tal has with his students, and I really started to join them again in January, after also taking a break in November and December. And in the very first one in which I returned, I had the courage to dare to ask the questions to Tal and just say, can you give me a reminder or a crash course on how I can turn the potential for post-stress traumatic disorder into post-traumatic stress growth, which I know is something that Tal often speaks about, so that I can really come out of this as a true happiness catalyst professional. And, as usual, that answer was really so simple and inspirational. So I want to share with you a few highlights from that. And it basically his summary was: one, things don't always happen for the best, but you can always make the best out of what happens, and that's what we learn how to do, what we need to learn how to do. And is really second point was, your world was turned upside down in few days with a life-threatening situation and complete uncertainty about the future. That is indeed the definition of trauma, and you really have to go through that process, because there was also a lot of loss through that process, and you have to give yourself space and time to mourn also the loss even of that period. But the most important thing also for me is you need to give yourself time and be patient. And yet there was something I never realized about, which is shared, which is that the root of the word patience means suffering, because the only way out is through. And there is a reason why who is sick is called a patient, and that is because he needs to have the patience to go through the suffering. And as for turning post-stress traumatic stress disorder into growth instead, there is no one way solution fits all. It's really about keep experimenting with all the possible strategies and finding what's best for each of us. So his recommendation, which I'm really happy to have that reminder at the beginning of January, was keep taking this time for yourself and keep experiencing with all of the items that you're already doing. So EFT, exercise, sleep, walk, talk, dance, because again, as I mentioned, recover is the most essential part after any stress or trauma. And I can tell you, January was for me really ended up being a month of sleep. All my body could do was really taking a lot of sleep. And the final thing that I want to share with you is that then the day after my husband returned, I took for myself time to go to the spa, which is one place, the sauna and pools, that really it's a major reset and recharge for me. And as I was there, the major reflection that I had was the following, and it was that all of this new awareness, knowledge, and practice of happiness that I've learned and practiced over the past few years, they do not make me unbreakable. They do not make me a sort of superwoman that can take on all of the fire bolts that life throws at all of us. I will continue to fall. I will continue to get angry or upset and have a meltdown and scream out to a nurse here and there. And I also need to recover after I fall. It's not just like, okay, it's done. Oh, let's go back to work. I needed that time in January to recover. But what all of this extra knowledge and practice does for me is that it enables me to fall less often, less hard, and to be able to recover better and in a shorter amount of time, because of the resilience that I've built and because of the practices and the strategies that I know. And this is why as I'm starting to work again this month of February, I'm really looking forward to do as many as possible well-being booster sessions so that I can really share my knowledge and practices of happiness even more, while still being reminding myself of what I need to keep reminding myself and practicing every single day. So, and for this reason, in this month, I'm having both a special offer for in-company option on those well-being booster sessions, and I'm also having a special offer for an open class, assuming that there are enough people interested. So I'm sharing here, if you're interested in having an open session, I'm offering that at only €250 per person for our podcast listener. Just send an email to happiness@wownow.eu, quoting this podcast and also sharing your preferred time and day. So that as soon as I have 10 people, I will arrange for a specific day of the week and time zone. And for in company also, just reach out to me if you're interested. Basically, the idea is that we have in each session, we have first 1 to 2 hours of learning the key insight of the science of happiness and Tal Ben-Shahar SPIRE model, which focuses around spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional well-being. And then we spend about 1 hour to 1 hour and a half playing the happiness game, in which there is a series of challenges that need to be addressed using the 5 elements of the SPIRE model, and focusing on the strengths, which can be identified by running the VIA character assessment. That was all for today's episode, a very, very long one, and probably the longest one I will ever have. Thank you all for listening, and if you have any feedback or you have a similar story that you would like to share, any experience, just reach out. I'm Rosaria, and I'm committed to bringing more happiness into the world, one customer and one employee at a time, by empowering companies to achieve growth, productivity, and profits by cultivating happiness. If I can be of any help or support for you and your company with my advisory, keynotes, sessions, or training programs, I would love to hear from you, so get in touch. In the meantime, keep following our podcast, taking care of your well-being, and connecting and radiating from the heart. Until the next episode, ciao! This was the Happiness Contribution Show, available on YouTube as a webcast and on your favorite channels as podcast. If you like the show, we would appreciate if you share it with one person that may benefit from it too. Subscribe to our channel and tune in for the next episode. You can find all the episodes and discover more happiness contribution tips on our website, happinesscontribution.com. That's all for today. Stay happy and healthy, and nurture happiness contribution.